In October 2018, three friends camping in the remote Black Ridge Mountains of Colorado captured over 47 minutes of pristine, steady video showing a silent, unmoving humanoid figure watching them from a distance. For the final 3 minutes, the figure is gone. But when they review the footage, they see something impossible: it hadn't moved away. It had gotten closer. And it was now standing just behind them, its face pressed against the cabin window. The crisp, thin air of the Black Ridge Mountains tasted like pine and impending winter. For Leo, Sam, and Anya, it was the perfect escape, a long weekend at Leo's family's old, rustic hunting cabin, miles from the nearest cell tower or paved road. Their mission was simple: disconnect, hike, and for Sam, a budding filmmaker, capture the raw beauty of the Colorado wilderness. "Think of it as atmospheric B-roll for my documentary," Sam said, setting up his high-resolution video camera on a sturdy tripod. He pointed it across the small valley from the cabin's porch, framing a stunning vista of evergreens and jagged peaks. Time-lapse of the sunset, then all-night recording. Catch the stars. Maybe some wildlife. "Just don't catch me sneaking the last beer," Leo laughed, already cracking one open. As the sun dipped, a strange, thick fog began to coil up from the valley floor, silent and swift. It was unnatural, a solid wall of white that swallowed the very trees Sam's camera was aimed at. "Weird," Anya murmured, a wildlife biology student who didn't like anomalies. "No temperature differential for that. It's not flowing, it's just rising." By full dark, the fog pressed against the cabin windows like a hungry, silent creature. The world beyond was a uniform, opaque white. The usual chorus of crickets and night birds was utterly absent. The silence was a physical pressure. To lighten the mood, they built a roaring fire in the stone hearth, told stories, and played cards. The camera on the porch, forgotten, continued to record, its lens seeing nothing but a blanket of fog. Around 2 a.m., a deep, unnatural cold settled into the cabin, seeping through the logs. The fire, despite being well stocked, suddenly died down to embers as if starved of oxygen. All three of them woke at once, a shared, unspoken dread hanging in the air. "Did you hear that?" Anya whispered. A sound had woken them, a low, rhythmic thump, like a slow, heavy heartbeat coming from the porch. Thump. 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 Sam, driven more by fear than bravery, crept to the front window and peeled back the curtain. The fog was still there, impenetrable. But 10 yards from the porch, at the very edge of the tree line now swallowed by the mist, a dark shape stood. It was tall and impossibly thin, a humanoid silhouette blacker than the night behind it. It was perfectly still, facing the cabin. "Guys," Sam breathed, his voice tight. "There's someone out there." They spent the next hour in terrified debate, huddled away from the windows. Was it a lost hiker? A hunter? But who would be out in this fog? At this hour, standing motionless? They shouted, flickered the porch lights. The figure did not react, did not move a muscle. Finally, as the first gray light of dawn began to dilute the absolute blackness, the fog started to recede. As it pulled back like a retreating tide, they watched the figure. It didn't walk away. As the fog cleared around it, it simply wasn't there anymore. One moment a solid silhouette, the next, empty space. Shaken but relieved, they packed to leave immediately. Sam collected his camera, noting it had run all night, the battery nearly dead. "At least we got something," he said, not sure if he wanted to see it. It wasn't until they were back in Denver, in the sterile safety of Sam's apartment, that they reviewed the footage. The initial time-lapse of the sunset was beautiful. Then the fog rolled in, a white void. For hours, the video showed nothing but shifting gray. Sam fast-forwarded to the timestamp around 2:15 a.m. The fog was total. Then, a dark shape emerged from the white. The figure. It appeared not by walking into frame, but by materializing as the fog subtly thinned in one spot. It stood, facing the cabin, unwavering. For 44 agonizing minutes of video time, it didn't move an inch. It was a statue of shadow. "This is creepy as hell," Leo said, leaning closer to the screen. Then, at 3:01 a.m., the figure on the video vanished. Again, not by walking away. 1 second it was there, the next, the fog swirled slightly in the space it had occupied. "See?" Anya said, a nervous tremor in her voice. "It left. Right before we woke up. It just poofed." But Sam, an editor, noticed something. He scrolled back 5 seconds before the disappearance and played it at normal speed. The figure stood. Then, in a single frame, a 1/30th of a second, it seemed to flicker. It was a digital glitch, a blur. "Wait," Sam whispered. He zoomed in on the frame after the flicker, where the figure was gone. He increased the brightness. The contrast, and he saw it, the figure hadn't disappeared. It had moved. At that moment of the flicker, it had crossed the 10-yard distance from the tree line to the porch. The movement was so fast the camera only caught the blur as a distortion in the fog, but now, in the enhanced image, they could see it. The dark shape was no longer in the distance, it was standing on the porch, directly in front of the camera lens, its back to them, facing the cabin's front door. It was so close its form was slightly out of focus. A cold dread, deeper than anything they'd felt in the mountains, seized them all. Sam's hand shook as he pressed play for the final 3 minutes of footage. The camera's view was now partially blocked by the dark, textured fabric of a coat, the figure's back. It stood immobile again. Then, after a minute, it slowly began to turn. It pivoted on the spot, a stiff, unnatural rotation, and as it turned, the camera began to capture its profile, and then its face. It wasn't a face. It was a smooth, dark oval, like polished stone or wet clay. Where eyes should have been were only shallow depressions. It had no mouth. This blank, featureless head completed its turn until it was no longer looking at the cabin door, it was looking directly into the camera lens. It stared for a full minute. Then, it took one slow, deliberate step sideways, out of the frame. The final 90 seconds of the video showed the empty porch, the retreating fog, the first light of dawn, but the audio, which they had neglected, told a different story. Sam turned up the volume. Over the white noise of the windless fog, they heard the faint, unmistakable creak of the cabin's floorboard just inside the door. A soft, wet shuffling sound on the wood. And then, clear as a bell, the sound of slow, steady breathing, not from outside on the porch, but from inside the cabin, mere feet from where they had all been sleeping. The video ended. The three friends sat in paralyzed silence. They had proof. Undeniable, terrifying proof. They had captured a thing. On camera. But the proof came with a horrifying postscript they had been oblivious to. The entity hadn't been watching them from the woods, for the last 3 minutes of that long, terrifying night, while they huddled in their beds thinking the danger had passed. It had been on the porch. And then, according to the final sounds on the tape, it had been inside with them. They never went back to the cabin. Sam uploaded a heavily edited, 30-second clip to a paranormal forum, which was quickly dismissed as a clever hoax. He keeps the full 47-minute file on a hard drive he rarely dares to open, because sometimes, in the quiet of his own apartment, he thinks he can hear that same, slow thump. 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 Coming not from the woods, but from the hallway just outside his door. A reminder that what they caught on camera wasn't just a ghost in the fog, it was an invitation. And the game, it seems, is not over.